This thing ushered in the era of homologation, and might very well be the most important car in the history of rallying. The Lancia Stratos. Lancia had exited motorsports at the end of the 1950s after their failed Formula One program. But by the 1960s, they had decided to come back, and their motorsport of choice was rallying, in the form of the Fulvia. The Fulvia was a nimble, light, front-wheel drive coupe with a 1.6-liter V4 engine making 165 horsepower. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it was plenty. It demolished the competition. It won the Italian Rally Championship every single year, from 1965 to 1973, with the exception of 1970 where Fiat won. That's pretty darn good. And in the international stage, they also dominated. They won the International Championship for Manufacturers, which is basically the beta version of the WRC. And they won that thing with 2 rounds to spare, and by 1973, the next year when the WRC was introduced, the Fulvia, well, it was good in the National Rally Championships, and it could hold its own on the international stage, but Renault had introduced the Alpine A110, Porsche had brought along the 911, and Ford had brought along their Escorts, and the, let's be frank, 9-year-old Lancia was a bit outclassed, quite considerably. So, they announced a replacement. But they weren't just gonna half-ass this, no, they were going to go all in. You see, Group 4 FIA homologation requirements indicated you need to build 400 minimum road cars for production. Now that's a lot of road cars for a relatively niche rally series. No one would be dumb enough to build all of those cars, right? Lancia was dumb enough, only it wasn't dumb because they were going all in on the world's first WRC homologation special. Now normally, Lancia works as Pininfarina. However, Bertone saw an opportunity to make a partnership, so they took an old Fulvia chassis, put a radical, crazy futuristic concept body on top of it, and Bertone himself drove it to Lancia's headquarters, unannounced. That wasn't a problem though, because the car, which is just 33 inches tall, was so low, they just drove it underneath the gate. And when the Lancia executives saw the crazy concept, they agreed that Bertone should design it. And Bertone did not spare anything. They got Marcello Gandini to work on the project. He made the Miura. That's all you need to know about the guy. But there was a bigger problem. Lancia wanted to use the 2.4-liter V6 from the Ferrari Dino. However, Enzo wouldn't let that happen. He saw the new Stratos as a competitor to the Ferrari Dino, even though it's a completely different racing series, but whatever. Luckily for Lancia, the Ferrari Dino ended production in 1974, and since they weren't competing anymore, Enzo agreed to let them use the engine. In fact, it would be Lancia that was given the last 500 Ferrari Dino engines ever made. These things made 190 horsepower and were shoved right in the middle of Lancia's new rally car, which meant that when the mid-engined 190 horsepower rear-wheel drive sports car was sold to the 492 buyers that were allocated slots in 1974, it was a damn good car. The Dino engine rocketed it to 0 to 60 in 6.8 seconds and a top speed of 144 miles an hour. Now I know you're thinking, It's only 190 horsepower. How the hell can it do that speed? Well, it weighs just 2,100 pounds. And since it was so light and mid-engined and had the same dimensions as a Pebble, it was incredibly good through the corners, and the wraparound windscreen gave excellent forward visibility, which is good on a rally stage because you need to see where you're going. And on top of that, if that did not sell you that this mid-engined Ferrari-ish was a rally car at heart, it even had pockets in the doors specifically designed for rally helmets. Awesome! We have a Ferrari-powered, Bertone-designed, mid-engined supercar, designed by the kings of rallying. So how'd it do? Well, they didn't get the term kings of rallying for nothing. The Stratos replaced the Fulvia halfway through the 1974 season at Rally San Remo, and wouldn't you know it, it won the event. And you know what, it was so good over the rest of the season that just 4 rallies later, it claimed the title for Lancia. For entering the game halfway through, that's fantastic. And it really set the stage for what was to come. Because the Stratos dominated 1975 and 1976, ate those competitors for breakfast, spit them out, and wanted more. In 1976 alone, they scored 2 top 3 finishes, locking out the podium with another 2 wins on top of it. Then, in 1977, they won the first ever WRC driver's title in a Stratos. It was on fire. But if you're wondering why the obviously very dominant Stratos didn't win the manufacturer's title in 1977, well, good old Italian internal politics got the best of it. You see, Fiat had just designed a brand new rally car themselves called the Abarth 131. Now, Fiat owns Lancia, and Fiat reckoned that if they were going to have a dominant rally car as like the poster boy for the brand, it should be wearing a Fiat badge, not a Lancia badge. So they axed the Stratos project in favor of the 131, which I love the 131, it's a great car, but the Stratos is better. And it proved that over the next few years, because even though the privateers that raced it had no corporate backing of any kind, and had power restrictions because the thing wasn't in production anymore, they won a further 7 WRC events. And 7 years after the Stratos was launched in 1974, a privateer scored its 18th and final WRC win at the Tour de Corsa. No rally cars ever had that much of a gap between first win and last win. Even the dominant Delta that Lancia made in the 90s, that only had 6 years of competition success. And while the Stratos is obviously known for being one of the greatest rally cars ever, single-handedly launching the purpose-built rally car and the homologation special into the automotive lexicon, that wasn't the only place it competed. A privateer entered a custom-built 3-liter version of the Stratos into the first ever European Rallycross Championship in 1976, and wouldn't you know it, they won the whole thing. They also had a 560 horsepower Group 5 silhouette version that was entered in GT racing series across the globe, and sure, it claimed some victories in tarmac rallies, and finished 20th overall at Le Mans. It never was able to rival the top-tier vehicles like the Porsche 935. The Stratos was not the end for Lancia's rear-wheel drive efforts, as they continued to evolve their rear-wheel drive platform in the WRC into the Lancia 037, which won the last ever championship for a rear-wheel drive car in 1983, and scored its last ever podium at the 1986 Safari Rally. And as recently as 2 years ago, Michael Storsiak commissioned Pininfarina to build 25 new Stratoses, because apparently Lancia didn't copyright the name Stratos, so anyone can use it. So they used it for their new car, sort of a homage, if you will. What you do is you take your Ferrari 430 donor car and cut it in half. Then, you take a whole foot off of the wheelbase and reconnect it together, and tune up the engine to 540 horsepower. And the final step is to add a brand new, lightweight carbon fiber body perfectly resembling the Stratos. There's only 25 made, and there are confirmed rally versions. They look sick. They handle just like a modern version of the Stratos would handle. It's very pricey, but if you have the money to cut a Ferrari in half, I don't think you care. The Stratos is one of the all-time rallying greats, and not just rallying greats, one of the all-time automotive heroes. There aren't many homologation specials before the Stratos. The only one that comes to my mind is the Porsche 917. That was actually a homologation special. But certainly in the rallying department, this was unheard of. And people say the Quattro is more significant. And I'm not going to disagree with that for the introduction of all-wheel drive. But the Stratos looks better, sounds better, was statistically more successful. And I think it is better.